Supreme Magus, web novel, chapter 37. No rest for the wicked. When Lina woke up, she discovered she wasn't in her bedroom anymore. The moon was covered by clouds, and with only the dim light of the stars, she couldn't figure out her new location. Lina only knew she was now in the open. The cold night breeze and the rough feeling of the earth under her hands left no space for doubts. As her eyes started to adjust to the penumbra, she noticed some humanoid forms laying on the ground, only a few meters away. Glad of not being alone, she slowly crawled towards them, while trying to remember what had just happened. Lina was about to shake her roommates, when the moon shined through the moving clouds, revealing them to be skeletons. Lina started to scream, and when she recognized the nightgowns they were wearing as those she had seen countless times on her friends, it turned into a shriek. Around her, multiple figures started to move and moan. She tried to run away, but tripped into something soft and squishy, tumbling on the ground. When she opened her eyes again, she was staring at a tombstone where was engraved, "Here lies Creblon Lark, beloved father and husband." Lina suddenly realized what was that place, why it did feel so familiar. That was Lark's family burial ground, where all the forefathers of Count Lark lied in their eternal rest. In that moment, she remembered everything. The poisoning, the twisting knob, the ghost. She wanted to believe it was all a bad dream, but her foot still hurt after the fall. Lina was about to lose her mind, when the moonlight revealed that the moving figures weren't undead, but other members of the staff she knew all too well. Two of them were actually her accomplices, Zaman, the second oldest butler after Poultice, whose loyalty actually lied only with the Countess, and Bissia, a young maid that had been planted a couple years ago to keep an eye on the Count's private quarters. The three of them had been tasked by the Countess to ensure her return to power, by eliminating all possible obstacles. It was only thanks to Zaman's and Bissia's help that she had been able to slip the poison in the food unnoticed, even when she wasn't supposed to be in the kitchen. Either by relying on Zaman's authority or Bissia's flirting charm, she had managed to complete every task assigned to her after the Countess' forced departure. There were also two more staff members with them, Rafia, a young valet she had often worked with, and Olmund, one of the many butlers of the household. "Lina, is that you?" Bissia looked confused, shaking her head, trying to regain her focus. "That scream of yours almost made my head explode. Where in the God's name are we? Why I'm not in my room?" "I clearly recall." Zaman's voice was cut short, the blood draining from his visage as he remembered the last events. "The Count," he exclaimed. At those words, all five of them froze up in place, swept away by the terror caused by the unnatural encounter. "The Count is back," Rafia said with a choked voice. "And the gods know why, but he believes I'm responsible for his death." Soon they all started looking around, finding the corpses of their roommates. Their clothes were unscathed, while their bodies seemed to have aged centuries. "Rorik, why did this happen to you?" Olmund fell to his knees, near the remnants of his oldest friend, crying desperately. "Shut up, you fool." Zaman forced his mouth shut with a hand. "In case you haven't noticed, we are in a cemetery. Is better not to wake which can eternal lie." Zaman didn't dare emit more than a whisper, he was very superstitious. Usually Lina would mock him for his cowardice, but that night was different. She could feel her guts twisting and turning in fear, her body begging her to run away. Suddenly the ground trembled, and a raging fire erupted from an open grave. "Count's Trekwell Lark grave. How could you do this to me?" The Count's spirit slowly emerged from the flames. "Prepare to be judged by my ancestors." From the tombs nearby the Count, three skeletons arose, unearthing themselves up to the waist. "Murderers," wailed an old man's voice. "Traitors," yelled a woman's voice. "Vermin," said a man's voice. The three skeletons were struggling to get free from Earth's embrace, while announcing their verdict. The dirt, tattered clothes they wore kept ripping apart. "The die is cast," the Count's spirit said with an otherworldly deep voice. "Confess." He was pointing his finger towards Rafia, who suddenly felt pushed down on the ground by an invisible force. "I'm innocent, I swear," he said, sobbing uncontrollably. The three skeletons started to wail as one, in a cacophony of indistinguishable voices. Their hollow orbits emitted a red glow, like a candle had been lit within, and like the Count, blood tears started to endlessly flow along their cheekbones. "Liar," the Count yelled, and Rafia was dragged by the invisible force towards the Count's open grave, whose flames started to rise and roar loudly. The others tried to hold him by the arms, but the spirit's pull was too strong. When Rafia was thrown into the fiery pit, he emitted an inhumane shriek while the flames turned from bright red to an ominous purple. "He will serve me in the netherworld, to atone for his sin," the Count's spirit said. "Confess." This time he was pointing at Olmund, who promptly complied. I confess. It was me stealing the silk bolts, exploiting my inventory duty. That's why there was never enough." "And how do you atone?" said the spirit, its eyes reduced to two flaming slits. "I'm so sorry, I swear." Words are not enough. The corpses on the ground arose, their orbits brimming with a red light. They lifted Olmund with their skeletal hands over their heads, and threw him into the pit. "Rorik, why?" was his final scream before disappearing in the flames. Before the ghost could pass his judgment, Lina kneeled deeply, head on the ground, begging for forgiveness. "I confess. It was me poisoning you, and those two are my accomplices," she said, pointing at the two survivors. Zaman and Bissia tried to take a step back, but the skeletons had returned, surrounding them again. Because of you my children are alone in this world. The ghost wailed in pain. It's only a matter of time before they join me in death. How do you atone? I'm so sorry, I've been stupid, I have no proof. I threw away the poison and burned all her ladyship's letters. Then burn yourself. Lina was then dragged by her dead roommates in the pit. Only the flames put an end to her shrieks. Zaman and Bissia kneeled too, going straight to the point. I can save your children, yelled the young maid. I'm not stupid, I never trusted that B*TCH as far as I can throw her. I kept all her letters, her orders, in case she broke her word. I keep them all under a loose board in the kitchen's pantry. As did I. Also, I know where she keeps hidden all her personal correspondence. The old butler rushed to add, fearing of becoming useless to his captor. She ordered the poison months ago, and there's so much more to it. It's all in a secret compartment right under her bed. I swear, that's all that I know. Please have mercy of this old fool. Magnificent, said the Count with his usual joyful and enthusiastic tone, clapping his hands in delight. Suddenly he didn't sound otherworldly at all. The skeletons fell down like puppets whose strings had been cut. The fire went out and the Count came down to the ground with a thump loud enough to be heard. Was this all? Zaman couldn't believe his eyes. A farce? Poultice completed the sentence for him. Yes, old weasel, I knew you were always up to no good. The traitorous servants were able to put a face to the old skeleton's voice. Jadon, Keela, be a dear and go retrieve the evidence. At this point I can't trust anyone else. The Count's heirs came right after Poultice, nodding, before running back to the house. Knowing he was doomed, Zaman still found the strength to watch into the open grave, finding out that everyone was still alive, just bound and gagged by tendrils of earth. Thinking about what would befall to him and his family, the old butler was filled with regret. The long years of loyal service, the savings of a lifetime, all those careful plans for his retirements, shattered together with his hopes for a better tomorrow for his sons. Lith sighed with relief. He could finally come out in the open. If he could, he would pat his back by himself. The results had far exceeded his expectations. Since Solis couldn't find anything in the remaining rooms, Lith had her follow Lina day and night, taking note of all those she was the most in contact with, to round them up all together for the final act. Which, by the way, had been quite a hassle to arrange. To avoid blowing his cover, Lith could only resort to chore magic and spells up to tier 3, like the hoovering spell he had applied to the Count. He had explained everything in detail to the Count, to avoid him being scared or surprised by the special effects he had in mind. Lith, of course, said he would move the skeletons with air magic, while he was actually using spirit magic. The blood tears trick was an easy one, chicken blood that he prevented to clot with light magic, while using water magic to make it go down the cheekbones, pass behind the ear and through the hair to get an endless stream effect. The single steps were easy, but keeping all those spells active at the same time, manipulating flames, blood, skeletons, had been quite exhausting, even with Solis's help. She had taken care of half the stage, but the mana she used was Lith's. They were like two divers with a single oxygen tank. The Count too was very happy with the result. I always knew that magic is awesome. Flying has been such a memorable experience, not to mention their faces. Count Lark was laughing like a kid after a successful prank. You should have seen their faces. Priceless. I never had so much fun in my life. He patted Lith's shoulder, covering him in white powder. Who would have guessed that old ghost stories from my books could be so effective? With a little tuning here and there, of course. For being a goody-goody two-shoes, the Count is quite a trickster. Lith thought, despite being so averse to torture, he had no qualms scaring so many people. **Telis. Yes, he never heard about psychological torture and PTSD. As soon as they got their hands on the incriminating evidence, Count Lark immediately used his communication amulet to contact the King's Bureau of Law and order to submit them. The night clerk assured him that they would move his paperwork on the top of the list, and that they would send royal investigators to shed light on the case. Translated from the bureaucratic lingo, it meant that the Count's case would now take days instead of weeks. Lith wouldn't take any risks, not after showing so much of his prowess, so he had the Count make his whole family come to the estate the very next day. He sent them also some clothes he had prepared beforehand. In such a palace, the lowest stable boy was better dressed than them, even if they wore their best suits. When they arrived, one way or another, all the staff was assembled to see firsthand the mysterious woman who had spawned the Count's alleged fifth son. They expressed much admiration for his mother's and sister's beauty, and even Roz received a lot of attentions. When Lith sent Solis to check if the rumor had finally died out, she replied with endless laughing out loud and an unbelievable story. According to her report, the household was now split into two factions. The first one, that she dubbed #Team Lith, was led by Poultice, which refused to step back from his initial theory. Who would have thought that such an airhead like the Count could also be such a schemer? Not only he got himself such a beautiful and young mistress, he also had the smarts to choose a woman whose husband resembles him so much that he would never suspect the son isn't his own. That witch of the Countess can't hold a candle to such gorgeous woman. The second one, #Team Roz, was led by Hilya. She was the head of the kitchen staff, first chef and also Poultice's oldest rival in terms of both authority and gossip skill. Are you gone senile or what? The Count is too noble and chivalrous to cheat, even on such a treacherous hag. Clearly, he had an affair before their wedding, and Sir Roz is the offspring of that love. That means that not only he is the real Count's fifth son, but that the young mage and his beautiful sisters are all his secret nephews. That's why he cares so much about the boy, and why he has brought them all here now that the Countess is dead, set to wipe out the whole bloodline. How noble of him. He probably has protected them from the shadows all these years, to keep them safe from his wife's jealousy and ire. Lith didn't know if to laugh or cry. How the *CK did we come to this? Sorry, Solas shrugged. It seems that the Count's staff has the hobby of making everything related to nobles look sordid. Thinking ill of something makes even coincidences looks interesting, don't you think? Lith shook his head in desperation. Poor mom, she is just a forbidden love triangle away from becoming the main character of one of those chick flicks that were all the rage a few years ago on Earth.